Next Chapter Podcasts.
Spring is here, and the shopping list is long. Time to make a Lowe's run. Buy 3 bags, get 3 free of Stay Green 1 cubic foot garden soil. Plus, right now, members can earn 4 times the points on an eligible purchase. Start spring off strong with these deals and more. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 3/25 while supplies last. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for details. Subject to change. Point boosters subject to exclusions and more terms apply. One-time only offer.
This Easter, skip the ordinary and whip up something golden with melty, creamy Velveeta cheese. From scalloped potatoes to rich mac and cheese, Velveeta turns every bite into a crowd-pleasing celebration, bringing the extra to the ordinary, transforming simple sides into lip-smacking, satisfying moments. So go on, make it melt, make it craveable, make it indulgent. Velveeta, respect the drip. Visit Velveeta.com/Easter for some recipe inspiration.
Now, where will I find hope? It's in us. It's in moments like this. It's in the purpose and mission of the Levine Museum, right? We have to insist on imagining America anew. And in our daily lives, we have to figure out how to live together differently. And I think if we can figure this out in the South, oh my God, we have solved the riddle of the Sphinx in this country.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and don't nobody want to hear it, but it's like this the South got something to say.
Welcome to Our New South, a podcast series presented by Levine Museum of the New South in Charlotte, North Carolina. Levine Museum connects the past to the future to realize the promises of a New South. To learn more and donate to projects like this, visit museumoftheNewSouth.org. Hi, my name is Kevin Blackistone, sports columnist at the Washington Post, coming to you from College Park, Maryland, where I teach journalism at the University of Maryland.
And I'm Dr. Robert Greene II. I'm an associate professor of history at Claflin University in Orangeburg, South Carolina.
In our first 2 seasons, we explored the complexities that make up today's New South, diving into censorship in healthcare, immigration and cuisine, struggles for rights and resources, and the global reverberations of New South culture. Here in Season 3, we expand upon this concept by welcoming 10 influential Southerners who share insights from their lives and careers as well as their thoughts on the New South and its future.
We thank you for joining us on this journey and for making the show a Signal Award, Communicator Award, and Anthem Award winner.
Follow the show, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and for the first time, we're now publishing portions of our interviews on YouTube.
Go to youtube.com and search Levine Museum.
Okay, let's get to today's episode of the show.
The South got something to say.
This episode of Our New South explores the region not merely as a geographic location, but as a moral metaphor for the United States. A place where the nation's greatest sins and brightest possibilities coexist in stark relief.
Our guest is Dr. Eddie Glaude. Glaude serves as the James S. McDonnell Distinguished University Professor at Princeton University and is a regular on MSNBC's Morning Joe and Deadline White House. His work includes essential texts like the bestselling Begin Again, James Baldwin's America, and his latest call to action, We Are the Leaders We Have Been Looking For. But before we get to the conversation, it's time for this episode's trivia question. Robert?
As you know, throughout this season, we're testing our listeners' knowledge of the Southwestern trivia. Are you ready?
I was born ready.
So you're saying you're not ready?
Well, just ask the question.
Okay, all right. Well, here's our question for this episode. Who coined the term Bible Belt? A. George Wallace, B. William Faulkner, C. James Agee, or D. H.L. Mencken?
Oh, I know the answer. I got it.
Oh, okay. Hold your horses. We'll reveal the answer at the end of this episode.
Okay. Now, before we get to our guests, I would like to ask Dr. Robert Greene II to provide us with some historical context to set the stage for our conversation.
The state of Mississippi is well known as home to many prominent Southern writers, artists, and intellectuals. Already, on Our New South, we have interviewed people from the state of Mississippi, such as former poet laureate Beth Ann Fennelly and 2-time National Book Award winner Jesmyn Ward. Other prominent writers and intellectuals from the Magnolia State include legendary writer William Faulkner, pioneering storyteller Eudora Welty, icon of African-American literature Richard Wright, and United States Poet Laureate Natasha Trethewey. Add to that list public intellectual, scholar, and native Mississippian Eddie Glaude. Born in Moss Point, Mississippi, Dr. Glaude represents the classic Black Southern experience of the late 20th century. His life has been a combination of an intimate familiarity with the civil rights movement and its aftermath, a desire to leave the U.S. South, and ultimately, a yearning to return home. His parents also represent the Black Southern experience of the mid-20th century, with a father who served in the Vietnam War before returning home working in the Postal Service, and a mother who worked at a local shipyard. Eddie Glaude's story is very much one of Black Southern working-class strivings during and after the heyday of the civil rights movement. Dr. Glaude also undertook another traditional route for intellectual Black Southerners, the historically Black university. In his case, Glaude attended Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. Long an incubator for Black Southern male minds, Morehouse has graduated such luminaries as Julian Bond, Samuel Jackson, Raphael Warnock, and, of course, Martin Luther King Jr. From there, Glaude would go on to the halls of Temple University and Princeton University before working at Baldwin College and then returning to Princeton and becoming its chair of African American Studies. Throughout this time, Glaude has contributed mightily to the national discourse about race, identity, and religion. His books and media appearances in places such as MSNBC have made Glaude a public intellectual and a household name. But Glaude has never forgotten where he is from. And like so many other Mississippi natives, his home state is never far from his mind as he ponders and debates the future of the U.S. South and the nation as a whole.
Our guest is Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr. He is recognized as one of the nation's most prominent scholars, a passionate educator, and a public intellectual who examines the complex dynamics of the American experience. Dr. Glaude is the James S. McDonnell Distinguished University Professor of African American Studies and Religion at Princeton University. He served as the inaugural chair of the Department of African American Studies for more than 14 years. A highly respected scholar of religion, Dr. Glaude is also a former president of the American Academy of Religion.
Dr. Glaude has written and edited multiple books, including the New York Times bestseller, Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own. He also contributes essays to Time, the Huffington Post, and the New York Times. His writings take an exhaustive look at Black communities, the difficulties of race in the United States, and the challenges we face as a democracy. Our New South welcomes Dr. Eddie Glaude. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased and thrilled to welcome to Our New South Dr. Eddie Glaude, the well-known and remarkable public intellectual who has written numerous works. And today we're going to talk to him a bit about how those works relate to the South. Dr. Glaude, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you.
Well, and I think this is going to be a great episode in particular because as I'm looking at the screen, it's three brothers with glasses. So this should be a great and profound interview, I can tell already.
Indeed.
All right. So I want to start our interview off by asking you a couple of questions about your upbringing. You were actually raised in Moss Point, Mississippi, which is a small rural community on the Gulf Coast. And could you tell us a bit about what it was like growing up in Mississippi and how those particular experiences shaped your view of the South?
Oh, my goodness. So it was idyllic on a certain level. Moss Point is called the River City. So it's a small town where bayous cut through all the roads. It has a distinct smell. It's a mixture of the porgy plant and the paper mill and the distinct scent of the Gulf of Mexico. When you go downtown, you're literally in a bay. The oak trees and the magnolia trees had long, cascading in some ways, Spanish moss, hence the name Moss Point.
Right.
Flowing from the trees. So it was beautiful. But, at the same time, it's a predominantly Black town, kind of held hostage by the shipyard in Ingalls. And these industries, at least I call was there, and Chevron and all of these things. So you would have these waves of layoffs. So the first thing that comes to mind is this contrast between, the actual physical environment, which is stunning, right? And the material conditions, which vary from poor to just middle class and working class. So it's a beautiful experience, man. And I'm from the coast, so I'm from the water, and so it's a different kind of Mississippi experience to be from the water. It just smells different. The trees are different. The rhythm is different than say in the Delta or in Jackson. So it's beautiful.
And it's funny you mentioned water because I'm coming to you from Claflin University in Orangeburg, South Carolina.
Yeah.
But for us here, the Low Country is really important. And of course, Kevin Blackistone is coming to us from College Park, Maryland. And of course, Maryland's known for the water
and crabs
and for all that, and crabs and Old Bay seasoning. But all three of us, have ties to the South. And I think for you, family is also really important as well. And I want to just ask a quick question about how the lives and careers of your parents also influenced your upbringing and what you experienced about the South as well.
Oh my goodness. Like so many of us, my relationship with my parents is one marked by extraordinary love and also complexity. My dad was the second African American hired in the post office in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and my mother spent her life working, for the most part, the janitorial staff of Ingalls Shipyard, and they basically grew up with us. So my mother had her first baby very early, like in the 9th grade, 10th grade, and I have 2 sisters and a brother. I'm the baby. I look just like my father, who was basically 21 years old when I came into the world. And so it was stressful for them, I can say. But he could stare at me and scare the living daylights out of me. There was a way in which he understood the perils that awaited us, and he didn't want us to make his mistakes or their mistakes. And so we were raised in a very strict environment. The only thing we had responsibility was, do whatever he told us to do and get our schoolwork done. But it was unconditional love, to be honest with you, looking back on it. But while I was in it, I wanted to leave it desperately. So I left home at 16 to go to college. Basically, I was running away and didn't know that, Mississippi is deposited in my gut. And I'm more than, how can I put this? I don't just look like my dad. All my discipline, my willingness to speak truth to power, my conviction comes from the way those people raised me in Mississippi. And it's just a beautiful thing to embrace now. It took me a long time before I started using Junior, but now I claim him in the best way I know how.
Well, from one son of a postal worker to another son of a postal worker.
That's that middle class existence, brother.
Exactly. Was anything more important to the Black middle class than the post office?
That's right.
So you mentioned that you get to Morehouse at age 16. You get a bachelor's degree in political science. You then go to other Black metropolises.
Mm-hmm.
You're now on the board of trustees at your alma mater, Morehouse, and you're a distinguished professor at Princeton University. So what got you, a Black boy from Moss Point, Mississippi, to Princeton University to do what you did? What is rooted in that Southern experience that helped you climb that tree?
Well, first thing I would say is grace. To make a journey from where I'm from, where there were no books in the house, really, just people read newspapers. My sister was the first African-American valedictorian of our high school, and that's the first year that they had 2, a white and a Black one. She went to Spelman, and I just trailed her. We were I think the first to finish college, I think. A couple tried to go, but they didn't finish. Of family members, not an immediate family. So I think, grace, just being in position and being prepared to receive what was the opportunity that was in front of me. But then there's something deeply Black and Southern And I want to say it has something to do with Mississippi. And that's grit, a kind of grind, a kind of discipline that is tethered to, bound up with how I was raised. So my dad, going back to that man who would wake up in Mississippi heat every single day during the summer, fix himself. He had a rotating lunch. He had bologna and ham, a bologna sandwich and a ham sandwich. He would sweat so much, he would sweat the belts out rotten. They would rot with sweat. And he got up every single day with 4 kids. My oldest sister is severely handicapped. She wasn't supposed to live past 12. She's now 64, right? 62, I'm sorry. And every single day outside of Sunday, and he had a rotating, they didn't take any vacation. He just took his vacation day across the year. So I was socialized in discipline, what it means to have a goal in front of you, what it means to be prepared to pursue it, what it means to hold yourself responsible for your failures and for your successes, and to be hard-nosed about who you take yourself to be. My dad used to say to me all the time, you don't need anybody to like you. You need the person you see in the mirror to like you. That's what you need to see. And, I remember my first achievement, Doc. I was supposed to, I was in the 4th grade, and the teacher was really berating me. And because I was one of the few Black kids in this class. And I just got up and ran out and said, "You're racist," and ran out. And I knew I was going to get killed when I got home, because you don't get up out of a classroom in the Glaude household. And my dad had this nose to nose with teeth clenched. He said, what'd she do? What'd she say? And I told him what she said. And he said, "If anybody ever talks to you like that, you do what you do. You handle yourself. You speak your truth." So here's this man who could look at me and scare me, but was instilling in me from an early age what was necessary to succeed. So, when I got to Morehouse, how can I put it? They just simply started to sharpen and deepen what was already put in me. So now I believe, coming out of the Glaude household in Moss Point, Mississippi, and having the crown placed above my head at Morehouse, that I'm supposed to be in any room that I'm in. So, wherever I am, I'm supposed to be. And so I think it's that Southern formation. It's a particular way in which that Black grit gets encoded in who you are, that I think has been a part of my own effort to accept the grace that has put me in position to succeed.
And of course, you become, you get your PhD, you're teaching religion, but now you are a public intellectual, and one who I certainly can say that I really enjoy your words, be they written or be they on the airways. But do you see yourself as using that platform to shape, redefine what is Southern culture or what is Black Southern culture to the rest of the country and the rest of the world, or is it something else?
I never thought about it in that way. I am who I am. The accent can come out real thick when I'm talking to my mama, and part of what I want to say or how I say it is rooted in how I was formed. So what I take myself to be doing is thinking in public with others, with love, and with the hope for building a more just world, to bring the fullness of my bibliography to bear on the subject at hand with my heart. And that's shaped by the South. No matter where I am, I tell people I'm from Moss Point, Mississippi. I'm proud to be from a state that carries with it the very contradictions that define the nation. It's something so extraordinarily beautiful about where I'm from. And it's so dangerous at the same time. So those bayous that I talked about, they're full of water moccasins, right? the Spanish moss trees and all this, the beautiful lush stuff. They have, all sorts of things in there. You never catch me camping because, nature is not nice from where I'm from. It's just beautiful from afar. So I think part of what I try to do is to bring the fullness of who I am in any space and to be authentically me. And if you want to unpack what that is or what that consists in, then it's Southern to the core.
Absolutely. And I think to add to that, as someone whose day job is as a historian, what I find compelling about your work is how much you incorporate American, Southern, and Black histories into what you talk about. And particularly in the book, Democracy in Black, you describe the South as both a specific place and a moral metaphor for America.
Yeah.
I'm curious in terms of how you see the South's history as being an integral part of the national history of democracy, of self-determination, of race and racism, especially in terms of this idea of what you refer to as the value gap in American history.
Yeah, I think the South has borne the burden of the country's racism. There's this idea that if only the South would get itself together, that somehow the nation would be all right. But, Malcolm X was clear, as long as you south of the Canadian border, you south, right? And so I think there's a sense in which the country has scapegoated the South for its national sins. There's something, of course, about, the region and slavery and Jim Crow and of course, before Jim Crow, redemption and reunion that set the stage for Jim Crow. Those ghosts still haunt the region. Blood soaks the soil of the region. But there's also something about the South that is quintessentially American. Imani Perry would say it's the heartbeat of the country, right? And then, of course, there are different Souths, right? Mississippi ain't, Virginia. And that ain't West Virginia or Florida, So, different forms of the South. But where I'm from, the Black Belt, right? Where I'm from on the water, I think there is something about the contradiction. The divided soul of the nation is in full view, right? And all of the ways in which that contradiction, the ways in which it is lived, the ways in which it is felt, you can see it in the poverty, you can see it in the diabetes, you can see it in the hypertension, you can see it in the ways in which the culture can't be disentangled. Soul food, for example, is a phrase of longing. It's folk who move from the South to the North, and then they describe what they ate. It's soul food. But it's the cuisine of the South. It's just differentiated by seasoning. Depending upon where you at, right? So I think there's something about, there's a reason why the music of the country comes from where we're from. Mm-hmm. And from my state in particular. There's a reason why the literature turns to the region, right? Because the contradiction is there. The beauty and the pathos, right? Mm. The virtue and the evil, all there. So you can't be melodramatic in the South. It's not about, clearly defined heroines and villains. It's too messy. Right? It's too messy for that. So that's why it has to be labeled the villain at all times, because it's too complex for that, it seems to me. That's all we need. There's some Glaudes that don't look like me. Right? That's all we need to know is the Baldwin talks about the violence of the South has something to do with the intimacy, right? That is evident under the cover of darkness. We're close in so many ways, and it's in our blood. And people want to deny it, but I think it's what it is. What it is. Does that make sense as an answer?
Oh, beyond making sense. I think it gets to the heart of what our podcast is actually about.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned Baldwin, who you just wrote about,
yeah.
How do you explain Baldwin as a Southerner?
Oh,
given that he's from New York, he didn't come south until like 1957 and South for him was DC. And then he proclaims himself a Southerner. Was there an attraction for you to Baldwin because of his Southernness?
No, not really. I think Baldwin, for me, Baldwin was the writer that gave me license to be rageful. And then he taught me how to love and be rageful. Right. So it's something in his prose that opened up, right, how I see myself and how I understand the country and how I see myself in relation to the man that we began with. That's my dad, right? But Baldwin, how can I put this, Doc? When Baldwin's in his house, even in Harlem, he's hearing a Louisiana accent from his stepfather. He's hearing the Eastern Shore from his mama. So what he's going to eat when they had food, right? So the cuisine he's going to be cooking. So he's the first generation in some ways. He's that generation that is once removed from the South, from the Great Migration, his first phase. So he's Southern in his house. And so then when you read the stories about Jimmy cooking, because he loved to cook, you wonder what he's cooking. And he loves to fry some chicken. And so there's a sense in which, the South touches him in concrete ways. And then that complex relationship with the stepfather sends him back to Louisiana to try to find him. And if we look at Heard It Through the Grapevine, which is a wonderful documentary with him, you see him return home, quote unquote. And that gives him a sense of rootedness in some ways. So I don't have to make him Southern, right, in any concrete sense. But I do know that his life, his worldview, when he longs for home, when he's in those Swiss mountains trying to finish Go Tell It on the Mountain, right? He's not longing for a Harlem that isn't touched by the South. He's longing for family. He's longing for the culture. He's longing for everything that makes him him.
Did you go through that in your journey after leaving Atlanta?
Yeah, once I left home, I was trying to leave Mississippi, man.
Right.
My closest partners was from New York. When I was in, his family, he got in trouble in New York. They moved him to this godforsaken place in Moss Point. And we became, I used to wear colored leaves and have my shell top Adidas on, trying to sound like I wasn't from Mississippi and the like. And, I go to Atlanta, I leave Atlanta, then I'm in Philly, I leave Philly, I'm in Brunswick, Maine. I'm thinking I'm going to end up in damn Canada, trying to get away from home. But, you carry the stuff that's deposited in your gut. And as I grew older and became more comfortable in my skin, home became the anchor. It's the source of the sound. There's a reason why I gravitate to Bobby Blue Blair. There's a reason why when I get in a certain mood, I want to hear, how can you mend, with Al Greene, bro. I want to and with some brown liquor. There's a reason why I want to fry some fish on Friday, right? Because I was raised Catholic. And, we ate seafood every Friday because you weren't supposed to eat, because I'm on the coast. Right. My last name is French. So, so all of this comes back. And it's, I think, working on the Baldwin book, I remember it like yesterday. I'm having trouble just starting. Reverend Barber sends me a Saints candle. It's by my computer every single day.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
He sends me a Saints candle. And I hear Baldwin's voice. And he says, if we're going to do this together, old boy, you're going to have to deal with you. Which meant I got to deal with Mississippi. I got to deal with home.
Well, and I think dealing with Mississippi brings us to our next question, one that we often ask our guests. Of course, our podcast is called Our New South, but we're always curious to know, what does the phrase the New South mean to the folks we're interviewing? And I'm curious, as someone who is from the South, who's written about the South and the nation for a long time, who's been a devoted public intellectual for a long time, what does that phrase, the New South, mean to you in particular?
To be honest with you, it's a hustle. Typically, when I hear the word New South, I'm thinking about, the way in which Atlanta is trying to figure itself. in the context of the racial unrest coming out of the civil rights movement and Black Power. The city that's too busy to hate, right? So the New South imagines itself as a commercial hub that's not tied down by the disturbances that defined the country for a period of time, particularly in '68, or by the ugliness of explicit forms of racism, that you can do business here. Let me build, Hartsfield Airport, and it can become the hub of a certain kind of cosmopolitan energy and commerce and the like. So the New South is a rebranding of a region that supposedly indicates that the traditional divisions, the caste system or the racial hierarchy, the white supremacy that has defined the region is no more. So you can come on and do business down here now. So the New South for me often works as a kind of rebranding exercise. Now, what does that mean to me today? That's my intellectual kind of response to it. While at the same time there's white flight, while at the same time there's the deep divisions, material class divisions that track along racial lines, right? At the same time, Atlanta is imagining itself this way. We got the Atlanta child murders. Baldwin is asking the question, what does it mean when Black folk, hold the reins of power and these poor Black babies are being murdered, right? So, I understand the new branding exercise, but then there's the cultural side of it, right? We could talk about it in terms of the sound. What does Outcast? And, that's a bit, we could talk about, a different kind of rhythm, a kind of cultural resonance, where, Atlanta, staying with Atlanta for a moment, Atlanta becomes, the Southern LA, right? It becomes a kind of center of cultural production. And, then you look at a place like Charlotte, or you look at, even, New Orleans ain't the same as it was prior to Katrina. It still hasn't bounced back. But you look at a Houston, you think about Miami, which has never really been just strictly Southern. It's in the Caribbean basin. So there's all of this cultural ferment, right, and possibility that defines the region. And you see it in reverse migration. Mm-hmm. Folk leaving, the North and leaving northern and Midwestern cities and coming back home. And you see the strain because the infrastructure is not ready for them. And you see that in Charlotte, you see it in Atlanta, you see it across the South, the quote unquote New South. But initially my thinking, Doc, is it's just a rebranding. But of course, it's not just that.
And you happen to be on the board of this organization called Deep South Today.
Yeah.
How does that tie into what else you do in your work?
One of the principal movers and shakers of Deep South is Andrew Lack, who used to be the president of NBC and MSNBC. And he took an interest in the way in which I engaged in political commentary. And we've stayed in contact since he left NBC. And when I saw Mississippi Today, and I saw the import of local newspapers, what he was trying to do on a digital platform, and really they broke the story on welfare fraud in Mississippi.
Right.
Yep. And won a Pulitzer for the work that they've done in that regard, as well as exposing how these powerful sheriffs across the state are abusing power and abusing people day in and day out. It's a form of journalism that is so necessary in a moment where I don't know how we're getting information to engage in self-governing. So much disinformation circulates. It becomes difficult for us to get the information to engage in the central task that democracy requires of us. And so Deep South Today, for me, aligns my interest in journalism as the fourth estate, the question of democracy, and home. And, it's hard for home to break through the New York Times. And it's hard for home as a thick and complex story to break through Sinclair. And, Mississippi, I grew up with the Mississippi Press. That's what my daddy used to read every day. And it was about that thin. And now it's gone.
Mm.
They read the Sun Herald or the Times-Picayune, and it's still not local news. When I was doing all the stuff I was growing up in, my mom still has the paper clippings of me in the Mississippi Press. So I just love Mississippi Today for what it's trying to do, and that it's also reporting on my place.
Right. And, to finish up our interview today,
Doc.
I do want to briefly ask you one last question before we get to our rapid fire session, which is, what future would you like to see for the South as a region?
Oh, man. What future would I like to see for the South as a future? What future would if America's going to be saved, if the divided soul that has threatened this republic since the beginning, that is, it imagines itself as a beacon of freedom and as a white republic all at the same time. If it's going to be saved, it's going to happen in our place. If the South can somehow take its history and its experiences as the ground for reimagining itself and reimagining itself, right? Then it could show the way. Not just simply having Black faces in high places, but a fundamental kind of effort at living, exemplifying a multiracial democracy. Because it's in the culture, it's in the blood. It's just a refusal to acknowledge what is. And if the South finally gets there, if it finally gets there. Now, mind you, that, when we think about the Great Migration, it's not just Black folk moving, it's white folk moving. And so when you get those folk who were formed in Jim Crow South moving to the Sun Belt, right? That's the reason why Arizona works the way it works. There's a reason why those folk, it has that rhythm and sound because it has its connections to where we're from. But I think if the region can, because it's the heartbeat, it's that of the country, if it can figure it out, I don't know how, but if it can figure it out, then maybe America can be the America that we imagine it to be. But I don't know. To be honest with you.
Are you hopeful?
I have to be, otherwise I would drink too much whiskey. But it's a blues-soaked hope.
Mm.
It's Du Bois in of the passing of the firstborn when he says it's a hope not hopeless but unhopeful.
Right.
Or it's B.B. King, another Mississippi guy. No, nobody loves me but my mother, but she could be jiving too. It's a blues-soaked hope. So, my faith is in the capacity of human beings to be otherwise, but I also understand that human beings are capable of remarkable evil. So, but they're miracles too. So, I'm a bet on the miracle side with the understanding that who knows what I'm going to get.
Well,
That's great.
I think on that note, we can now move to the fire question, which might give us some actual hope to leave. First off, where is your favorite place to be in the South?
Home, on my mama's couch.
Sweet tea or Arnold Palmer?
Sweet tea.
What's your favorite Southern word or phrase?
So, favorite Southern word or phrase? Oh my God, that varies. So it's either I be damn or finna go. We finna go.
Who's your favorite Southerner, living or dead?
Oh, favorite Southerner, living or dead? Living or dead. My great-grandmama.
What's her name?
Ruby Wilson. Best pinto beans on the planet.
Well, speaking of pinto beans, what's the most underrated Southern food?
Most underrated Southern food?
Yes.
Pinto beans.
Okay.
Right, because she would make pinto beans and whole cake bread on top of the stove, and you wouldn't even think you didn't have any meat. You would know you didn't have meat. It was that good. It was with some sorghum syrup.
Okay. Well, Well, next time you're in Washington, D.C., go to Salamander Hotel, where Dogon restaurant just opened, and one of their, the Black Chef, and one of their appetizers is a whole crab cake.
Oh.
It's a whole cake with this crab on top of it. It's outstanding.
That sounds amazing.
So there you go.
Okay.
Water and corn.
That's incredible. Well, Dr. Eddie Glaude, I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been a wonderful and profound conversation about the South, the nation, and so many things that our listeners are worried about right now. But again, you're giving us hope in an otherwise hopeless time.
Man, thank y'all so much. This has been wonderful. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
So, Kevin, I have to say that interview with Eddie Glaude was everything I hoped for and then some. He not only spoke to what life in the South is like right now, but he also spoke to how the South, and in particular his family, has shaped him too. And, he's given us a lot of food for thought this afternoon in terms of thinking about what the South can and should be for the rest of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he spoke from the heart. Usually we hear Eddie and he's on TV pontificating about some political crisis, some social crisis, some racial crisis in this country. We know he's well-written, well-published. He's at Princeton, hallowed halls. But he talked to us about Moss Point, Mississippi, right? He talked to us about being from, as he put it, he's from the water, right? He's from the water. He talked to us about family, his mama, his daddy, how his father reared him, right? The things that they instilled in him, and his odd desire to want to get away. But no matter how far he's gone from the South, all the way up to Princeton, New Jersey now, he can't get away. It's part of him. And I think it's just so reflective of so many things that we've talked about on this program. I had never, I bet you, if you walk down the street and you ask people where Eddie Glaude's from, I bet you none of them would say the South, and certainly none of them would say the Mississippi South.
Well, and to that point, I think Dr. Glaude's backstory is the quintessential Southern backstory. I mean, so many Southerners, when they're growing up in Mississippi or Georgia or South Carolina or elsewhere, when they get to a certain age, they're thinking, I've got to get out of the South. But they might leave the South physically, but they can never leave it spiritually. They can never leave it mentally. And I think Eddie Glaude proves that when the South is within someone, that instills in you certain values, certain cultural traditions that make you realize that the South is not just the stereotypes that we've discussed on this show. The South is also that real homegrown grassroots struggle to make the South and the nation a much better place than it has been. And I think Eddie Glaude's story, which also includes a stop at Morehouse, one of the citadels of the Black South, a stop in Atlanta, he is the kind of person who, even though he talks about the New South as sort of a PR move, he also recognizes that the New South, in its best, most generous definition, is the South that we all actually hope and wish for.
Yeah. And who knew? He loves Outkast. Did you hear him drop that?
Well, I mean, he loves Outkast and he loves pinto beans, so he's all right with me.
Now, Robert, let's give the people some relief concerning the trivia question.
At the beginning of the episode, I asked you, who coined the term Bible Belt? A, George Wallace, B, William Faulkner, C, James Agee, or D, H.L. Mencken? The answer is D, H.L. Mencken.
I knew that. The term Bible Belt was first used by the American writer and satirist H.L. Mencken in 1925 when he was reporting on the Scopes monkey trial, which took place in Dayton, Tennessee. Mencken was writing for the Baltimore Sun and used the term in a derogatory way, referring to the region in subsequent pieces with such quotes as the Bible and Hookworm Belt and Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the Bible and lynching belt.
Now, that interview with Dr. Eddie Glaude was phenomenal. Absolutely fantastic.
It was. And I just think it's cool that we got him out of his office space, right? We got him to talk about Moss Point, Mississippi, really kind of coming out the mud and taking his intellect from the South to the North, which kind of ties into one of our themes this entire year, this entire season 3, which was fantastic, which was getting back into migration. And so we've had intellects who have left the South and gone north with Eddie and Dr. Brittany Cooper. We've had a Mexican-born race car driver in Daniel Suarez leave Monterrey, Mexico, and make his home in North Carolina. And we've had someone like Chef Sarah Bradley travel the country and then return to her roots in Paducah, Kentucky to become the famous chef that she's become. So I think to me, that really kind of is something that stood out about season 3.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think someone like a Roy Wood Jr., taking us back to the beginning of the season, he's someone who left the South, but always comes back and is now firmly ensconced in Alabama life and culture. Or you think about someone like, again, as you mentioned, Dr. Brittany Cooper, who is heavily engaged with scholarship that really talks deeply about being a Black woman from the rural South. Or, Gina Chavez going all over the world, or Liz Wright, who left rural Georgia to go to Atlanta, to go to so many places around the world. Really, that idea of movement, but never really leaving the South behind, is, I think, one of the big things.
Yeah, and thank goodness for Michael Twitty, because he made me feel extremely comfortable in season 3 talking about our New South. Because he's the first person, being from Washington, D.C. like me, who said matter-of-factly and without hesitation that Washington, D.C. is South, is part of this conversation. And I always argue with people that it absolutely is, not just because we're below the Mason-Dixon line, and not just because you can walk through Washington, D.C. and I can point out to you places where slaves were sold or held, but also just because of the culture here. And it's, we're right next to Virginia. We're right next to Maryland. And so much of the culture in Washington, D.C. is, in fact, a Southern culture.
On the flip side, Representative Maxwell Frost made it very clear that Florida has its outlier status in the South for a particular reason.
Right.
As he put it, there are some parts of Florida that fit and some parts that don't. But he was also very explicit that his district, which includes Orlando, is a microcosm of the 21st century New South, with so many young people, so many people of color. It's a truly diverse area of the South. And Maxwell Frost was very clear that, yes, it does count as the South, although, again, he was very clear also that other parts of Florida are just other parts of Florida.
Yeah, I mean, and this time we got to really stretch, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we went to places in the South that we hadn't been before. In particular, I think of Kentucky and I think of Florida. Although we touched on that in a previous season when we were talking about the fight against book banning and that sort of thing. But yeah, we really expanded the idea of the South in general and the New South, I think, in particular. And everyone kind of had their own interpretation of what that New South is.
Kevin, speaking of the New South and this idea of New South we've been wrestling with for these past few years, you think about two men that we've had on the podcast, Representative Maxwell Frost and former Senator Doug Jones. And it's funny how, in many ways, despite the fact they're from different generations, from different parts of the South, these two men also embody a certain political, cultural, and social ideal of what the New South should be in Doug Jones, what the New South is becoming in Representative Maxwell Frost.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of Doug Jones's vision for the new South. It was the new leadership. And it's interesting because the trivia question we asked about the first governor of the New South, in a sense, being Sanford, and he actually referenced Sanford as a point of growth as someone he looked up to, as someone he kind of envisioned his politics, his policies for a New South. So, yeah, there's definitely a through line between the two of those guys.
But you know something, too, that I want to add to this as well, Kevin, because I think you summed everything up quite nicely. The rapid fire questions. They took our conversations into some new and really exciting directions because we got to learn so much about these people just by the kinds of foods they consume,
right?
The types of drinks they enjoy, the people that they want to spend time with. That I thought those questions were incredibly helpful to learning more about the South of the 21st century.
Which, you know what, reminds me, you haven't shared your answers to those rapid fire questions. So, Dr. Robert Greene II, I would like to ask you, what is the most underrated Southern food?
My mother's lima beans. And I know that we don't really think of lima beans as like a premier Southern dish, but I think of lima beans in the way that you think of a sixth man off the bench in the NBA. They might not get all the glory, they might not get all the attention, but when you have a good sixth man or a good bowl of lima beans, it sets off a Sunday dinner and makes it from something good into something special.
Very good. All right.
Now, Kevin, you can't do this to me. And I can't ask you any questions in response. Your favorite Southerner, living or dead?
Cliche answer, but I would have to say my mother. My mother grew up in Arlington, Virginia, but a part of Arlington, Virginia that was called Halls Hill. And it was divided. It was a segregated neighborhood, divided from the white community by a wall that the white community built. And getting back to my grandmother, when my mother was ready to go to high school, the state of Virginia told my grandmother that the black high school was filled and she would have to wait. And my grandmother basically said, hell no. She found some friends, leaned on some friends of hers who lived just across the bridge in Georgetown, neighborhood of Washington, D.C., which at that time was a heavily black neighborhood. And they borrowed that address for my mother, who would then take the bus all the way to Cardozo High School, which is a black high school in D.C., and that's where she graduated from. And my mother would take the bus to go to school, and coming back to Virginia on that bus, she would have to move to the back. Up until one day, some black men who were on the bus told her to keep her seat. And she did. And that's something that happened to a lot of people traveling on buses in this country in the South. So I'd have to say, yeah, my mother for her, just for what she went through growing up in Virginia.
No, I think it's safe to say that this season, along with the previous two seasons, really exemplifies how much there is still to say about the South. You know, our show begins with the South got something to say from Andre 3000. The South still has a hell of a lot to say in the 21st century.
Absolutely. It does.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we got a demo tape and nobody want to hear it, but it's like this the South got something to say.
Our New South is presented by Levine Museum of the New South. Levine Museum connects the past to the future to realize the promises of a New South. To learn more and donate to projects like this, visit museumofthenewsouth.org.
Our New South is produced by Next Chapter Podcast. Thanks to our audio editor, sound designer, and composer, Hal Murdoch, video editor, Justin Cortez, producers Brian Douglas, Alexander Pineras, and Cliff Whitfield, senior producer and writer Byron Hunter, and executive producers Jeremiah Tittle and Frankie Abbott. Please follow the show, subscribe, rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and watch portions of our interviews on YouTube.
Go to youtube.com and search Levine Museum.
Learn more at nextchapterpodcast.com/Our New South.
The South got something to say.
Thanks for listening.
Early birds always rise to the occasion for summer vacation planning because early gets you closer to the action. So don't be late. Book your next vacation early on Vrbo and save over $120. Rise and shine. Average savings $141. Select homes only.
I'm Bruce Martin, host of Pit Pass Indy. Each week, I go behind the scenes of the NTT IndyCar Series and introduce our listeners to the biggest stars of IndyCar, which features the Indianapolis 500 as its cornerstone event. The men and women that compete in IndyCar may be the bravest athletes in all of sport, as danger lurks around every corner. They are able to look danger in the eye without flinching. That is why the NTT IndyCar Series features the best racing on the planet. Join me every week as we talk to the stars of IndyCar, including the legends of the Indianapolis 500 on Pit Pass Indy from Evergreen Podcast.
Next Chapter Podcasts.